Look, bruh, all I'm doing is connecting the dots.
A work of art of the highest quality.
And what will you do with the big money?
But I guess I'll make a lot of money, so here I am.
Connect the dots, be clear.
But music was noise, and I thought art was bullshit.
I want to be an artist.
Oh.
I'm not a piece of art! Yes, bravo! I'm a peacock flying into a...
If money is all that you love, then that's what you'll receive.
It really was. It was a work of art.
It's not about money. It's about sending a message.
Hey, just look at that sky. It's a work of art. Ha, nature never knew colors like that.
A man can be an artist. And anything, food, whatever. It depends on how good he is at it. Creasy's art is dead. He's about to paint his masterpiece. It's a work of art.
Make that money, get paid.
Man, this is going to be a masterpiece.
Bothered to connect the dots.
This is an art gallery, my friend. And this is a piece of art.
Simply connecting the dots.
Yeah, well, money talks and bullshit walks, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's how much you know about art.
You can make a lot of money making movies like this.
You have to be a bit of a rebel to be an artist of any kind, I believe.
You're gonna make a lot of money, pal.
Only a highly suspicious paranoid cynic, or someone like me, with an eye for clues and patterns, could possibly connect the dots.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Connect the Dots. I'm your host, Justin Stillmaker, and we have a fun show for you today. I can't believe we are now on episode 3. Thank you for people who have been watching since the beginning. I've just been really enjoying doing all this. And yeah, I'm always never know what to do at the beginning of this. So you guys, eventually it'll get smoother and smoother, but I just wanted to be kind of open and honest about that. So again, thanks for watching, and I'm going to dive into my first topic, which is something that's a lot of talking in my side of the industry here in Los Angeles today, peak content. So what I mean by peak content is, I'm sure as everyone knows, there is about 8 billion streaming services you could be subscribed to right now at any moment. Like, you know, I just wrote down a short list off the top of my head. I was HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount, Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, Shudder, Criterion, Stars, Epix, BET, Discovery. This is a business model that's changed. It's obviously been around for almost at least 10 years now. Like, I remember when Netflix was just the only person doing streaming. And then every company was like, well, we're not going to let them have all the money. And so we started on what I would call heading towards peak content, which is all these streaming platforms producing great shows, bad shows, a constant amount of shows for you to watch and engage with. And from that, it was like something to me, like you could see the sort of like doom that was coming from this. And I think the industry is this year really starting to feel that. One of the things that made me decide to have this as a topic was over the last year, HBO has been merging with Discovery. So Warner Brothers, all their different entities is joined up with Discovery, and they're trying to make this. They just announced yesterday they're making a new streaming platform called Max. And it's, you know, at Connect the Dots, we talk about how art and money intertwine, and it doesn't get any more obvious than what's happening over there. When I look at something like HBO, which has over the years, for the last 30 years, built this like reputation as high caliber, great art while still delivering viewers and people want to watch, is slowly just being pushed out of the way to just something called Max. Like, to me, it's just like the evidence of peak content. It's literally just like, you might as well call it content. We have it for you. And so to me, it's like been fascinating to watch from both sides, right? So like, we have this like push where everyone's delivering shows. They're spending billions and billions of dollars to make stuff to get your attention. And what they're realizing is we've hit this point where I don't know how many hours we all have in the day to watch television. We have like maybe an hour or two and there's about 40 different options. You're just overwhelming people, not to mention all the different kinds of content we can consume. And so we've entered this like vortex of strange like this model that's like kind of upturning the business. So like I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but like when Netflix came out, they introduced the idea of the binge model, which is like you get the whole series all at once. And everyone was like, this is great. Me and my partner can spend the weekend and watch the whole thing. Except that's not really a great use of money for the studios. Like the binge model doesn't allow you to grow a show because like part of what grows a show is week after week, your friends mention it to you, someone else mentions to you, people write about it, it gets some nods on social, and it slowly becomes a snowball that everyone watches. Like Game of Thrones wasn't a hit in the way the first season by the time it was at the end. And it's like HBO was one of the few people that kind of held on to this model of getting rid of the binge. And so all these companies just chased after. They saw how much money people were making. We have to do this. Doesn't matter. And it was a great time for artists, right? Like they're like, whatever, just make a TV show. We just need it. We need it. And so like if you were in position to capitalize on that, it was a great time. I may have missed that window. I'm sure other people have too, but like it were some great shows that came out of it. Like I don't think something like Atlanta gets produced when you're doing this giant content boom, or Fleabag gets the attention it does. Really unique pieces of art were kind of made during this time. But as we've reached the level of peak content, it's basically gonna go away. And like, so one of the things that like the effect of this was Netflix, everyone's chasing numbers, but like, and viewers and subscribers. And like, as I said at the beginning, there's like a billion different shows you can be subscribing. No one has that much money to subscribe. I've subscribed to almost all those, and some you may have never even heard of. And like everyone's producing content for it. And like at a certain point, there's only a certain amount of money we're willing to spend on it. And television itself already had a better model, which was it had built the ads into the show. They don't care if your show is good as long as it's got people watching it, sold ads. And the streaming model got away from that. And now they're going like, but who's going to pay for this? We spent, like I read last year, Netflix gained 2 million subscribers and lost, or Peacock gained 2 million subscribers and lost $500 million. That is not a sustainable business model. And like everyone is just exhausted from these shows. And so you kind of start to see, oh, we got to cut back. Maybe we should do a little more reality TV show. I don't know if we want to do this kind of creative idea. And now the art versus money is going back the other way as we hit this kind of peak content. And then now you're also, the other problem that TV used to have was it had residuals built into it. So if you were a writer or director or an actor, you were on a hit show, and then it would air on TBS. Like we all grew up watching Seinfeld and The Simpsons and like on these reruns. And, the people who made these things were allowed to make money off that. That was gone once we introduced the streaming model and the binge model, because they would just pay you more up front to have your show because they want people watching it constantly. It just becomes part of this library. It doesn't become a thing to sell ads, which sounds like it should be a good thing for an artist that I should be. But like in the end, it's just inflated budgets, got rid of the risk. And now you're also seeing like right now there's pretty close out here in LA, a writer strike is coming with possibly a director strike, because basically the binge model, the peak content model broke how the industry works. And now no one can really sustain a lifestyle doing it. And that's like a really sad part of it all, is like we need, it was set up at work. We had ads, we had residuals, and now that's all gone. And on top of that, they just need it more and more. So people are like being forced to like work in little writers' rooms. I was chatting to a friend who writes for television this week, and he's still never been to set of something he wrote. Like he's written for shows that have been on TV, and it used to be like you'd work your way up as a junior writer and you'd go on set and you'd learn how to produce and you learn the other side of the business. And that's how people like Shonda Rhimes and like people who have had like huge shows for a long time start. Kenya Barris, like they saw how it's done, then they're able to get to where they're in charge, and then they're able to, guide the next generation, and it allows this kind of like, this cycle to go through. and peak content was like, we need it all now, and spend as much money as possible. And now everyone's like, everything's going to start, coming together. You're going to see Warner Brothers and Discovery. You're going to see, oh God, I'd even write down Apple, who has like all the money in the world, could buy Netflix tomorrow. And now we have Apple Netflix, Ted Lasso meets Stranger Things, and it's just going to drown everyone. So that's when I say we reach peak content means, I think as a viewer, they're gonna keep coming at us with new shows, but I think our attention is like, we've hit this point where like, I've had enough. Like, I'll pop on. Like, I remember everyone I knew watched Netflix, and now, while sure it's still a dominant stream, I don't think people pop into it as much, because what you're doing is you have a trust. You, like, when you sign on to these networks, you have a trust, and that's what HBO always had. HBO guaranteed you interesting shows, but now that it's Max, the word HBO's gone. Like, right now, we still know it's the same thing, but in 5-10 years, are they going to be allowed to keep making interesting shows and content that have kept us coming back? Whereas the Euphorias and the Succession are also going to be propped out by the 18th version of Game of Thrones or Harry Potter. And so, yeah, we've kind of reached this peak content apocalypse, and I felt like that was a key. Like, it's just like, it's causing all these issues that are starting, like having the strike and channels going away and mergers. And so, to me, peak content was a classic example of art versus money and how they are so intertwined, and led to some great things. I don't think like a lot of people who got chances would have got them, but now one wonders the doors are going to start closing, and I'm just really curious how it plays out. And so that's a little bit like what I wanted to talk about. But now I've rambled on like a paranoid person about peak content, I want to bring on my guest, Caullen Hudson, to chat a little bit about money and art. Caullen!
From the crowd. This is
like
cool.
Crowd sound. Scott, can we get on that? Can we get like just like, I want like that wrestling pop, like a Stone Cold glass break when you come on, like a guest.
Stone Cold, man. I saw a documentary on him, and I like have a newfound respect for like the aura he presented and the persona he has. I can not go on a whole thing about that, but
no, cool. Well, I think I saw the same doc in that like I always felt happy to like, I grew up watching wrestling. I kind of got out of it by the time I was like 16, but I've been watching like old documentaries on Peacock, another streaming thing.
There you go.
And I was very happy to find out he's not like a conservative Texan that like he's sort of portrayed, right? Like,
big facts, yeah. No, it's funny because during 2020 where the uprisings, right? We saw like on Twitter every day someone was doing something good or something bad, and I saw his name pop up, and I was like, "No, Stone Cold, don't be racist, no." But it's like Stone Cold saying like "fuck you" to everyone who it was not for the movement for Black Lives, and I was like, "Okay, Stone Cold, I see you."
It's been fun to watch, like. Because like The Rock and Stone Cold were like every fucking teenage boy's favorite person during this like that period where they're taking off. And like while I love The Rock's journey, I feel like he's become kind of like now people are kind of off on him, like because he's such a like refusing to give any answer. He's like I don't know if he's a conservative, but he's just doesn't want to offend anyone, right?
Oh yeah, he like we can get on to it. But like he's like from what I've seen, he's like moderate, slightly left, which in my view is like. Right, is the right. So it is what it is, but also it's funny because the way he presents, the way he speaks and stuff is like reminds me of my dad a lot. Like large man, good stature, like speaks really well. My dad's like much more moderate than I am, so it's just like you feel like you're like my dad in a weird way.
Yeah, that is what we should probably issue a warning that like me and Caullen are both pretty far left, and I feel like it is gonna come up during this conversation. Like the fact that we would be like, yeah, moderates might as well be right. That's. Not to dime you out, Caullen. Not to like. But okay. So one of the things I like to do when these interviews is like, one, how do we know each other? Because like, I sort of remember how I met you, but like the part about having a career in the arts is you just sort of meet people and you kind of people. Like.
You see,
you were
faces.
An AD, right? Like you were on like a commercial I did.
AD'd or I was in production in some capacity. I want to say AD'd some commercial you directed. This was this was 20.
It's like almost a decade ago. 2013. Yeah, that's on 2014, 15.
It was a while ago. It was like my freelance phase after undergrad. And I think we really connected more so like over Twitter over the years.
Yeah,
and just tweeting about like movies and stuff, but also like politics. And I was like, oh, Justin, like, and we didn't like talk that much on set. We're just like get the job done. Yeah, it's like, oh, he's like a talented artist, whatever, but also he's like has like a good political acumen. And like my the bar for like straight cis white men is very low.
Yeah,
me.
no,
So
it's pretty easy to clear.
But he cleared it by a long. I was like, okay, he's down. And so
me and Stone Cold, we're trying.
Yeah, seriously, Stone Cold is the bar of political acumen and leftist politics. For the straight white guys.
Because I think it was. I remember that though. I did go to, if I remember correctly, your dissertation. Like this was like.
Yeah.
Was that a dissertation? What was that? You had to stand up and give like a whole speech. I remember that.
Yeah. I went to DePaul for undergrad for film, and then went back to school at DePaul for a master's in sociology. So this was technically not a dissertation. I don't know, a final project, a thesis, whatever they want to call it, but it was a final project in sociology at DePaul on drill rap and activism and the parallels between the two in Chicago from like 2013 to when I graduated 2010 to 2017. I forgot about that. Big support. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, I had a big foam finger and just was like but okay, so like that's what I've always wanted to know. So how did you make the shift from you went to film, like what pulled you into going to film school or like studying film?
Sure. I think when I was in high school, really middle school, high school, I did a lot of acting. That was like, I thought I was gonna be like an actor kind of thing, and I also played sports and had a lot of like just varied interests, I guess. Yeah. And so fortunately, my school in Columbia, Missouri had a place called the Career Center. They had like a digital media track, like a welding track, a nursing track, and all different schools in the area could go there. And so in the digital media track, they had filmmaking, like video production, as well as graphic design and like web design too. And so when I started like knowing what it took to make a movie, like, this is cool. And like, someone working out with my therapist is like want to be in control of things now. So it's like I can control how it works and control the narrative, right? And so I was like, this is cool. I like creating stories and I like making visuals match like an arc and have that arc mean something. And so that really spawned me off like to want to be behind the camera and like make stories and make things. And I've always had a lot of interest, and it's just like, okay, I can't do everything, but I can do like one thing and just fuse them all into one. And film is that way to do that. Media, a broader landscape, is a way to kind of do that.
I agree completely. Like the thing I love the most, I mean, anyone has watched the show is like I'm passionate about film, and like it's because it's like it's a little bit of music, it's a little bit of images, it's like you get to pull in, and it satisfies a control freak issue as well. Like that's like I thought like that like.
And what you learn when you start making, especially on a bigger level, it's like you have to be able to trust immensely. Because like I'm not a sound guy. It took me an hour to set up this microphone. You know what I mean? I'm not a sound person. I know what I kind of want as a score and a feel, but I can't make the things. I have to trust people to be able to do that in a way that supports my vision and also surprise me with things I didn't even think about. So as much as it is like, for a producer or director, even an AD, logistically, you want to control kind of how it works, whatever, to make this end product that's beautiful and great, everyone loves. You got to trust. You got to trust. You have to.
Well, and like I to all other artists out there, like learning to let go is such a huge part of it, because your stuff's only get better once you do it, because you're working with other great people. Hopefully, I guess don't have bad taste in friends and other artists, but like let go is like such a huge part of it. I can trace back to when I want to be a director to like a couple different moments, but the one that's the control freak issue was I remember I got in trouble. I got in a fight. It was the second grade on the playground with a kid. We ended up throwing fists at each other because he wouldn't play Ninja Turtles correctly, and I can't think of a.
That's amazing.
I was just like, no, you're supposed to jump down. I was like at second grade telling kids how to play like. Get it together, Stillmaker. That is just so insane to me. But like now that I think of my career, I'm like, oh, it's not that different. That's like I'm more fun about it. Obviously, we only fought the one time, but like it's
now you get lawyers involved and gets litigation. And it's all
you don't want to be doing that. So then, you studied filmmaking at DePaul. You like were into was there certain movies that were like really your thing? Like,
not really. I'm like a bad film nerd. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I don't have like a favorite movie type of thing.
That's upsetting.
It is upsetting. It's like a cheap answer, I feel like, but I really have a good regard, a nice regard for City of God. Just the way, it's not necessarily like a Rashomon effect, but the way they like tell different stories, but have a centralized character, and the way like journalism views society, right? And how someone from society that's always demonized explains their own reality. I feel like that's has always resonated with me. It's kind of some of the work I do now. I also just really like The Social Network. I feel like it was just
great.
a great film on
That's
all
a perfect studio
points.
movie.
You know what I
like,
mean? Yeah, it's a great studio movie. So that's my studio movie answer. Then my other answer is City of God. And the ones that, are good for other reasons.
City of God fits perfectly into like your shift. So you then, you studied film, you're working in commercial, you meet me, you've worked on all these sets. Like, did you have any like weird sets where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore? Like either directing or ADing or working? Because there's always a moment where you're like, so this is what I've chosen, huh? Like,
not really. I think I always was like building Soapbox, was like my film and activist entity, like on the side. So I think like after I graduated undergrad, I was like, how do we blend like filmmaking in like the most beautiful and cinematic and expansive way that we know film to be, both documentaries and scripted films, with like radical grassroots organizing with an actionable end and with a structural narrative change. How do we do that, right? I didn't see that didn't exist. They were like socially conscious documentaries that at the end were like, donate to the whales here, or something like that. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like, okay, it's not talking about like larger systemic inequities in ways that make people think differently and then can also act in the meantime. And so that's kind of how Soapbox Productions and Organizing was born, like the summer after undergrad. And it's built a lot since then. But in that time I was freelancing and stuff, it was like I had these skills. I like working in production or producing my own stuff. And really what kind of spawned a lot of really digging in and knowing I wanted to do like Soapbox full time and really see it through was going back to school in sociology. And it kind of sparked my thinking on the world. And like, I could read all the books and I knew some organizers in Chicago and did like some like local organizing here and there, but I wasn't really rooted in movement. And so sociology for me was like give me language, understand things. And then like I mentioned earlier, my thesis itself was interviewing drill rappers, interviewing activists on like why they do what they do, what sparked them into doing what they do, and then looking back it up and seeing how similar the two trajectories really were, especially in Chicago, which I've like has been my side for creativity and organizing and like radical politics the past 10 plus years.
What part do you enjoy more now? Because like, I mean, like you can see the trajectory. Like when I saw that like dissertation, I was like, okay, I can see how you're taking film and doing this and you're combining it with this activism and like a sort of, this is a loaded word, but an in-your-face activism, because I feel like there's like the more like the content you were creating is much more what we see now, certainly since like the uprising, where it's like a little more rooted in the actual cultures of the different groups. Where before that, I feel like there was always a little more like, here's a serious issue, like you said, donate to the whales or whatever. And like with Soapbox, it does not. You guys aren't interested in making content like that, at least from the outside. And was there like an active decision to do that?
Not really. I think early on it was like me and the camera. They're like borrowed from friends. I didn't have any money to buy one myself. And so there's a lot of more so stuff we saw like post 2020 of like, protest videos type of thing. But this was 2013, 2014. That wasn't like a thing. Right. But also I think the important part that I always try to tell people about Soapbox, whether it's activism end, the film end, or the podcast, whatever, is like we are actively organizing with organizations, campaigns, what have you, as well as documenting and like telling the stories. And so, I think now, luckily, there's community-based like journalistic outlets and some film companies that will tell that narrative unapologetically and present radical politics in ways that are very matter of fact. And like, this is just true. And it happens to point to what you would call as left. But I think for us, it's like, we're doing all that, I think, at a higher level, but also like, we know these people. Like we know them. You know what I mean? We're doing the boring, before you get to the protests, the meetings and the spreadsheets on how to do what and what the chants should be and like what the strategy should be. Not like for every single project, but for a lot of the times we're rooted in movement, also documenting movement. And I think also what I appreciate, and I start thinking about now more so too, is kind of digging into that film nerd that I should have always had with like the analysis of how I see the world and being able to look and criticize movies on a different level. So like at least when I was in film school, and I think a lot of people when they first kind of getting into it, it's hard to watch a movie because you're like, okay, what why didn't they see there? Or like that's
that takes a long time.
It's hard to watch it, right?
Yeah.
And so now I still have a little bit of that. I have a little bit of I'm just sitting here enjoying it. Then I also have like, is this a feminist critique on this? Or like, oh, they're trying to make this critique on Black Lives Matter, but it's really like shallow and it's not digging into this. Clearly, they had no one consult them about how the session works, the language itself, and so it's like I see movies now through like 3 different lenses, and we've kind of dug into that as an entity as well. So Soapbox has a podcast called Bourbon and Browntown, and we started a thing called Whiskey and Watch, where we will, we're always kind of sipping on something during the podcast, but we'll have previously watched a movie, and we'll talk about it. And sometimes it's like a movie that's like obviously kind of deep. We watched Passing throughout the year, but based on a book. 2 Black women that pass as white, and they're kind of moving through the world as white, and it gets these deeper conversations like what does blackness means, and what is passing, and how is it really an active term, and what have you. So on its face, it's a deeper film, right? We also watched the Batman, the newest one. And so I think what I appreciate now a little more so about bigger action movies, if they're done right, they have that deeper analysis already rooted into them. And even if not, I'm going to critique them as such. And so looking at the Riddler is like not really the worst guy in the world. And then also looking at, at the end and the January 6th-esque aesthetic, and things like that.
That movie in particular said not all cops with its whole chest. It really
Batman's so fascinating because like Batman himself is a cop, right? But also Gotham shows how the cops are just useless at the same time. So it's like kind of abolitionist light, and it's just a fascinating like film and mythology of Batman in general across the mythology of the entire thing to watch and think about.
I'm with you. Like Batman in particular is like I think such a window into the male psyche in a lot of different ways. Like certainly the straight white male psyche of like. Yeah, I'm alone. Like the way he appealed to me in my teens to 20s to the then like, and I got in my 30s. I was like, wait a second. So this guy's solution to the poverty and crime is the dress up and beat people. Like you have all the money in the world, just dump. It's just like to me, like I still love all the Batman movies, but I'm like, this is the stupidest hero of all of them because it's like you have the solution, you have money, like you could just help this community. Instead, you're just like picking on people with mental health problems, as far as I can tell. Like it's my the trajectory of how you view Batman. I think this always changes. And so like he's a good cipher for how like art and act, like you said, like he's kind of an because the cops are always so useless, then why do we have them? Like we can just have a bunch of Batmans running around. Another important question is, since I've seen your dissertation in 2017, you've been promising me I'd be a guest on your podcast, and it still hasn't happened.
Oh man!
And now there's
there's a spreadsheet, and your name is on it. I can say that.
This is upsetting. And you're watching movies and drinking whiskey. Now I feel you're actively trolling me to not put me on. This hurts. That's actually why I had you on. It was important.
To troll me live. Okay, that I received that. I received that. I will say there is that spreadsheet with your name on it. And now, I mean, Whiskey Watch is still somewhat new, so
that's right. That's just hearing about that one. I was like, well, I better.
We got to get our movie critique acumen up to be at your level. That's what.
Is that? Well, we're gonna start doing movie watches at some point soon too. So you'll have to come on. You'll come on ours first, and then you'll be like, I need Justin on mine. Working in activism, making films and docs, do you find it difficult to, like, this whole show is about how art and money seem to influence each other. Do you find it hard to tell the stories you want without feeling they're changed because of the money, or you kind of, with Soapbox, found a way to keep a wall up between the two?
Can you elaborate on keeping a wall up between the two? I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
I think, well, like let's say, I mean, it's always different in docs, but let's say you're being funded by a company that then doesn't want you to report on this particular thing that maybe they do business with. And like, you don't have to name, like, if that's happened, like, but like, you just sort of see how even when making docs or films, you're told to pull things out. Even in advertising, we kind of want to sometimes be truthful, and then they're like, well, not that truthful, and they pull, and you're like paycheck versus like, making sure Soapbox is up and running. Do you ever run in? Are you able to kind of like be in a sweet spot?
It's been, honestly, finding a sweet spot has been nice. I think so. We're 501c3 nonprofit, and so with that brings us able to apply for grants, right?
Yeah,
and we got a 501c3 status 2018. It's now 2023. And so there was a time, I think shortly after my graduate school, where I kind of made a decision, okay, like I'm not making bank right now, nor is that like really the goal, but like do I make a shift in some other direction? Do I kind of like follow academia? Do I start freelancing again, just try to get like to a production union or something like that, whatever. And it's like, no, this is what I'm doing. I was starting to get involved a little more so in movement and like seeing those spaces open up, seeing the importance of art and cultural work and cultural organizing and all that. And Chicago's beautiful. Chicago's dope. People are making it happen. And people do what they want to do, and they figure it out along the way. And so I kind of bet on myself, and then started building a team. Shout out to David Moran, who joined in like end of 2016, who's been just amazing. And I think for us, it was just like kind of just figure it out. I think we had a couple different ways on how to find funding. There were some groups that we had to work with and done some like micro documentaries, what we call them, that could get funding and kind of pay us for that kind of work.
Yeah.
But the biggest spark, honestly, was COVID and the uprisings. And so from like 2018 to end of 2019, we could get funded like project based. So we'd have like a 5, maybe 7 minute micro doc, interview some folks in movement around a certain issue, get paid for it, not making bank, but doing decent. The problem was that other than our projects themselves, there was still so much work we were doing as far as building so much infrastructure, starting the podcast that you didn't get funding for. We didn't have advertisers for the podcast, so on and so forth. And so it was tough. 2020 hits, and we're still like every year we're kind of finding other pathways to do things. We have folks who do movement media. Shout out Ergo Podcast, and they have advertisers here and there. They have fiscal sponsor and stuff. At least they did at some point in the past couple of years. So there were already kind of things in the pipe that could happen. Crossroads Funds, a small, really dope grant funding organization in Chicago that funds like dope radical movement work and always has. And so we got our first, maybe $5,000 grant through them or something like that, which was great. It wasn't like we got the money that had to make a project with it. It's like, oh, this is us, infrastructure, buying equipment, whatever. That was great. And so, had some moves like that. They were the first one, and we tried to go for other grants. We find, we couldn't for whatever reason. Part of it for us is like, and it's still interesting to kind of talk about it now, is that we will make films, mainly documentaries, some scripted, podcasts, whatever, but also, like I said, it's Soapbox Productions and organizing. Organizing is important. So we're also doing the organizing, unapologetic work. And so some folks are like, well, are you an activist group? Like, well, yeah, but also make movies. Well, are you like a film group or journalism group? Well, kind of, but also we organize, right? And so no one can really pin us down, which is like a good thing, but also bad because they couldn't get the bag. COVID hits, and everyone's freaking out. I think a lot of these bigger grant funders, we can have another conversation about the nonprofit industrial complex, how it operates a lot much like a capitalist corporation of sorts. They were like, fuck, people need money now. And like, spoiler alert, people always need the money because capitalism is a constant crisis.
What?
Blackness is a constant crisis. Patriarchy is a constant crisis. But you saw large grant funders were giving emergency funds to folks, and we're just dishing out money and trying to figure out how to support people as soon as they could, which is good. But again, these are constant crises, and it shouldn't take a once in a lifetime pandemic to start doing that. And so that was an interesting moment for us, because luckily we had a couple of different films and podcasts in the pipes. We were kind of editing stuff during the initial lockdown, and it was okay. I'm still working a lot, but it's kind of things that slowed down, which is good. And then in my mind, things are going to open up in the summer. Things kind of slow down a little bit or something. George Floyd gets murdered rather. And, for me, just being a black man in this country, but also having been doing police and prison abolition work for a while, it's weird looking back on it because I was really desensitized. I was like, okay, it's Monday. Like watching it, egregious, terrible, horrible, like whatever. But, I kind of just didn't really bat an eye because that's what the police do, arguably like are meant to do. So when they kill 1,000+ people a year, when they don't kill someone in a day, that's what's weird and rare and unique. So when that happened, it took me, the whole week happens and like, oh, this is new. And so, we talked about this before. We saw the statements come out. We see people in the streets consistently. We see orgs are always doing the work, doing more of the work. People are like doing mutual aid. People are going to protest. People are like challenging city budgets. All this beautiful it's really a beautiful moment, as much turbulent as chaotic as it is.
Yeah.
And so what we see in the nonprofit space is not only are they making the statements and everything, but they're starting to give lots of money to either Black-led orgs or orgs doing racial justice work or doing police abolition work, which, you know, we were told you couldn't be that radical and get money and stuff. And so, long story short, a lot of big organizations funded money through Crossroads. They gave us like, you know, a $30,000+ grant. And from then on, we've been able to talk to these big organizations and be like, hey, where were you in 2019, 2018, what have you? We've been doing this work and now you've come to the table. We've always been here. And so it's nice that, like, instead of us having to change or water down our politics or water down what we do to kind of fit a model to get the bags come to us because they realize that we are doing the work that's important. And during that time too, we see how narrative change and framework change is so important as well. Yeah, is it yelling at your older person to like vote against this budget that is inherently anti-Black because it gives more money to police? It's that, and like those structural, I guess, easily measurable kind of campaign wins, or whatever. But we get wins few and far between. But you know, it's the making people think differently about how their city spends money, think differently about carceral institutions, think differently about how all the things that are quite literally life-giving, healthcare, food, houses, we should all just get, no matter who we are, all the time. And it's an easier demand, easier ask, easier thing to say when folks watch films and see stories about folks who are deserving, and just by being themselves and being human in the world.
The great thing about art, if you can get the money to tell a story that's a little not exactly what we want and expect, is it creates this empathy. The same way the George Floyd thing operated, right? Like you said, this basically story happens every day in America, but this one grabbed the attention and it made corporations and people with money go, oh, we should be funneling it here. And it actually reminds me a lot of how like film work, like, oh, this is an underserved audience. We should put more money, and then money comes to the art in that sense. And so it's just like one of the things I'm always trying to do with Caullen is like just slide corporate guilt money his way, because I work in advertising, and they're like, it's just like, he's like, who is it from? Because again, you still have your standards.
It's from Halliburton, because we can't. Don't tell.
That is, there's two places where I've drawn the line, and that was one of them where I was like, I can't do it. But at the same time, I was going to work on a campaign for someone, and I called Caullen. I was like, is this guy at all legit? And you're like, fuck no, he's not. I was like, okay. Should we say his name? No, we probably shouldn't say his name.
I mean, it's your show. I'll give everybody all the smoke. But I don't want to get you in trouble.
He didn't win, guys. It's okay, because he didn't have us. Not that the other guy who did win had us, but I choose to believe. So. Yeah, like, all right. So then I have another question for you, which is, how does you also, you're a very fit guy, you're a personal trainer, you like teach these giant classes that take place in the morning that you're always inviting me to that I'll never do. But I appreciate the invite. How does that like fit into your activism? Do you feel, or even like,
that's fun. So I've been teaching fitness classes for a little over 10 years now. The past, I think when I was doing a lot of freelancing and kind of figuring things out and not doing a bunch of film stuff, I was teaching a lot more. So that kind of supplemented my income. And it was fun. I was good at it and whatever. And as, you know, from 2018, 2019 on, as Soulbox has really grown, and like I've grown as a creator and filmmaker and like organizer / activist, I think there's a difference there. You know, I have been able to maybe just leaned into like just being my full self all the time. Not that I like changed the space styles around too much, but what I've kind of learned, especially with just like going back to school and just like living in the world and just like thinking more deeply and only becoming like more, radical seems like too reductive of a word, but just like think about how these systems of violence and oppression are just embedded in everything we do and think about. Like at every step of the way, if I can combat this, even if it's small, and check myself, because that internal work is super important too. It's worth it, right? And so I think, you know, originally it was just being very open about like the stuff I do outside of the fitness space, as little as instead there's an exercise they call man makers. And it's like, one, like, what are we doing? But two, it's like, why are we even giving an exercise a gender in the first place? Those same woman makers kind of take it back, which I like appreciate and see, but also like, if I ever do in class, I call them non-gender conforming person makers, just to be like obnoxious. But it's like, why are we doing this? So it's like, and fitness space can be really toxic with all those things as well. But so like combating it like with language, stuff like that. But I think one of the most overt moments was we did a fundraiser for a soapbox called Fitness Against Fascism, where we did like a workout class, like a high-intensity interval training workout class, either I or someone else led. The parable there was like going to a protest, something that's like loud in your face. We also did a like a yoga class, so it's like all the stuff you don't see about taking care of yourself and
how to
like
come down from all that
community
energy.
care and like how do we, how are we healthy within ourselves and with our communities in order to do all that stuff, and also just to live and be peaceful, because like living longer, especially as like marginalized bodies, but anybody, is not what capitalism wants us to do, right? It wants to work, produce a profit for smaller people and drop dead. And so like that itself is active resistance. It's just not in the ways we think about it. And so we would do that, have a community conversation about it too. And I think since then I've just only been more obvious about the ways I think about the world from then on. Like I think, when I teach classes at places I don't have to wear like a shirt in my studio on, and I'll kind of have like, I have one crop top that says like all war budgets leave a child behind, something like that. But it's just stuff like that. So there's a line there a little bit, but like wearing those kind of shirts are just like, and when we have announced that in the class, being like, hey y'all, like it's Chicago budget season. If you don't like those potholes on your street, yell at your alderman. Like it's the civic stuff is kind of like it's not picking a side, but it's like here's what's happening in your neighborhood. We also have a class next week, but here's all those things happen. So
have you ever had
there?
Have you ever had anyone in the class like not have your politics and kind of like grab you?
I mean, I don't like say, hey everyone, my name's Caullen, we're doing AIM rap today. Fuck the police. I don't like do that. But I think I have like not reprimanded, but like I have been talked to about either like stuff I put on Instagram, and then also conversations that were overheard by certain clients, and handled those in the way of like, this is Instagram. My social presence is not has anything to do with this. Like I'll advertise my classes there. That's me. So like can't do anything. But as far as like me being overheard, it was kind of weird. And it's like, again, it's like with that, the moments like that, I'm like, how do instead of powers that be in my institution get mad at me for something, it's like, how do we put a sort of justice framework on this and pathway? It's like, okay, let's talk about it. Like, maybe not who said it, but it's like, okay, can you tell me what they said? And you're like, how do we repair the harm here? Like, how do we have deeper conversations about this? And also, like, the notion that we can separate politics from fitness space is laughable to me. One, because our very beings are political, very social, and has power, oppression, privilege baked into it, which is like everyday life. It's inherently political, and also fitness space can be so fucking toxic. As far as the body shaming and the lookism and the patriarchy and all this stuff. So the fact that you're like can normalize invisibilizing these systems is actively oppressive. And so like breaking that is the thing. This is all pre 2020. 2020 hits. What do you see? You see fitness spaces having like resist in there, giving money to certain dope groups, putting their black squares up. That conversation changes, and fitness starts talking about these things. They're talking about anti-blackness and black creators and black fitness professionals and how they feel in certain spaces, and start having these conversations. And I don't get reprimanded like that anymore. Those conversations aren't happening anymore. And the same, folks who were saying like, hey, why are you posting about No Cop Academy, this campaign to stop the city from building a cop academy in West Garfield Park, this franchise neighborhood in Chicago? Why are you posting about that on your fitness Instagram? They're the same ones going to protest for the movement for Black Lives. So I'm like, this is interesting, because 2 years ago, when I told you what the police budget was, you didn't want to hear it.
Well,
but now you're actively doing the thing. And so with how I move in most spaces, and then how Soapbox works, I think we try to have those narrative tools and actionable ways to plug in kind of at the ready for folks, right? Because one thing I think we've been asked before, I think we talked about this too, as far as like, when a big watershed moment happens, a Trump, a COVID, a SCOTUS abortion decision, what have you, like, are we like making content to show people right away? And that's not really the case, but we do recognize the moment. Recognize people's are more they're more ready to take in a message that we're giving, and more willing to move, right? We saw it a lot during the uprisings, and so we're like, hey y'all, we're glad you are questioning police budgets now. We're glad police ain't shit. Here's the Snow Cop Academy project, this micro doc we did several years ago. The campaign's over, but here's some things you can learn from this. Here's what abolition really is and how it's not reform, how we've been reforming for 10 years and police have only gotten bigger budgets and only been worse. Here, all these things you're hearing, like messages you're hearing, like we already did the work for you. Here it is, like join our side. We'll try to be patient with you, but like honestly, our people are being killed, so we don't really have time for that. Right. How do you do that with grace, but also be like, here's how to plug in, here's the narrative tools you need, and how do you move forward with it?
Well, yeah, because it's all some form of storytelling. Like it's all finding narratives and like connecting. Well, I gotta have you back on because you and me will go on for another hour. So I'm gonna stop us at some point here. We can pick it up whenever I'm on your podcast. But no, I would love to have you back and just talk this stuff. But honestly, Caullen, thanks for coming on and plug. Where should people check out, find out more stuff about you and Soapbox?
Oh my goodness! At Soapbox PO, P as a Productions, O as an organizing on all the things. SoapboxPO.com. If you want to toss us that bag because we still need some, SoapboxPO.com/support. You can find me on Twitter, CaullenHudson, so at Caullen Hudson, on Instagram at CaullenFit, CaullenFit.
Amazing. All right, well, dude, let's catch up on Twitter, and I'm gonna be in Chicago in a couple weeks, so we should get together. So
hit me up.
Let's talk soon. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Caullen. That was great. Getting on to the next. Let me look at I have an outline to the side. I got completely lost. Okay. So now is my favorite part, outside of the guest, obviously, is to do, I love to talk my theme weeks, our subgenres. And so this week's theme is Groundhog Day movies. So Groundhog Day came out. It was a movie, just a movie, a great original film, like very unique, very like I've never seen it. It's from 1993. Bill Murray is someone who just dies and keeps repeating the same day until there's no explanation of why this is happening, which is I think the key part of a time loop movie is that you're stuck in it and it never tells you exactly why this is happening. Sometimes at the end of a story, it might have a resolution, but what's so unique about Groundhog Day was that it came out and one, it was a friggin' like Bill Murray had been around and loved all through the 70s and 80s, but I feel like this is like where we meet the melancholy Bill Murray that would go on to be in all the Wes Anderson movies and the Sofia Coppola, like the next gear. And I feel like Harold Ramis, who directed this, a movie in Illinois, by the way, really brought it all together. On top of that, there's just like this tremendous, like, there's something almost spiritual about the movie Groundhog Day. Great piece of art. What happened? Well, people saw this potential in the art form of the story that was created, and we start to get copycats. And I don't mean that in the it's a negative thing because I actually think these time loop movies are good. But like following that, you get movies like Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat, which is an action science fiction movie with the biggest movie star on the planet, Tom Cruise, keeps living and dying and repeating. They try to sort of explain it at the end, but like this is a Groundhog Day movie. Someone saw Groundhog Day and was like, we can put it on top of an action movie and it'll stand out. And it really is an effective movie. And I think honestly, it's one of the movies that really revitalized Tom Cruise's career. Like he had the couch jumping and Scientology. And then around this time, I think there was something cathartic for an audience to see Tom Cruise. One, he plays kind of a weakling for the first time in one of his movies, and he just we get to see him keep dying. There's a great montage it's kind of playing through where you just see him die, and there's always like this little scream when he dies that's very funny. And that took that Groundhog Day concept, and they put it on this big action sci-fi movie. And then one of the next ones I always think of is Palm Springs, which is I think came out during the pandemic. Really wonderful comedy with Andy Samberg and Christina Milioti. And again, just like a comedy like Groundhog Day, but they were like, oh, what if it was a rom-com? What if it was about people falling in love and being silly? And they realized, so like what started out as a piece of art became this format that people can repeat and use and kind of prop up stale genres like the science fiction, action, and then what else? The other? Oh, happy. One of my favorites. This is, I think, the outside of Groundhog Day, the best use of the time loop, which is Happy Death Day. Which is a very funny horror movie. I guess I'd call it a horror comedy, but it's just, a woman, Jessica Roth, I believe is the star of this movie, keeps getting killed, keeps coming back, and then they use that kind of mechanism to you, like, oh, she can gather more clues before she dies to figure out who the person killing her is. And I think it's so funny because you just know when Harold Ramis and Bill Murray set out to make this unique film called Groundhog Day, and then it's been turned into all these different. I wonder, I don't know, like, do they think it's stupid that these movies have seized on their art to kind of make a more commercially viable? Groundhog Day was a hit, but like a more commercially viable movie. But to me, it's like a classic example of connecting the dots, which is you see it change. Happy Death Day is like an excellent horror movie. They made a sequel that I personally think is terrible. But your mileage may vary. And then you start to see it even all the way down to Groundhog Day again with Russian Doll, the TV show on Netflix, which takes another kind of character actor face in Natasha Lyonne, like Bill Murray, and just have them repeat their day, and you're with them, and like it becomes almost a movie about spirituality and religion, because like God knows every day can kind of feel like the same. And I thought I never saw the second season of the show, but I thought the first season of this was really brilliant and like a fun use of the Groundhog Day format. Now, there are other kind of movies in this vein, but I think these honestly represent the best of what that kind of genre is, which is like the concept is very simple. Like there's a movie called Boss Level that you can just kind of put it on top of something, repeat it, and it gives such a change and variation to similar stories we've seen a billion times before. And that to me is like one of the amazing things about film and art and money is like you have this breakthrough. Money's like, oh, we can do this. But then, all these movies I listed here are all excellent. Like they took a format and still improved on it or found a way to make it their own. And I think all those movies are just, I'm sorry, I got caught reading the comments. Are really solid, and like you're gonna keep seeing it. I think it's like there's something about Groundhog Day. Like there's very few movies like it before it, and so it's very unique. And I think we're gonna see more and more because it's just acceptable. It also this is what I meant to say. The other key part, I think, the Groundhog Day it came out in 1993, is actually, to me, inherent use of video game logic. So all these movies also carry what I would call video game logic, which is like you play a mission, and when you die, you repeat. And so I think before video games, that was like, not necessarily a normal concept, but by 93, they'd had about a decade of Nintendo games, and I think going forward, everyone plays video games. We're used to it. We're used to that kind of die, come back. Die. And so like, I think the audiences get a shorthand with it. And that to me was what makes Groundhog Day such an interesting subgenre. Okay. Last segment. I'm going to try to I don't want to keep everyone here for too long, but so this is when I usually talk about who won art. And this week I'm really excited because this week art wins. And what I want to praise and talk about is stuntmen. Stuntmen are such a crucial part of filmmaking. Like, particularly, the reason this jumped out to me was in the last month, we've had John Wick 4 come out, which is an excellent movie. It's almost 3 hours of fights and inventive uses of how to kill people. And that comes from the stuntman. Like, that movie is directed by a stuntman. At the same time, we had Creed 3 come out, which has a couple of brilliant fights in it. And that's also stuntmen. And like, that movie in particular was drawing from anime and other action movies. And we also had, in the last couple months, we had Plane, a Gerard Butler movie, which is a big hit. And I think it's about time that these movies that are like often dismissed as not art, because I feel like stunts are such a huge part of them, that like, it's become more of a cause online lately that stuntmen deserve to have, or women, it should be stunt people to go with what Caullen was talking about. Stunt people deserve their own spot at the Oscars. It's such a key ingredient to so many of the films we love, like Top Gun Maverick. Here's like a big film that like they're flying in those planes, and like while Tom Cruise is a big movie star who does his own stunts, that also makes him a stuntman. He learns and works with his team. Keanu Reeves, since like The Matrix, has been working with a lot of the same stunt team that allows him to do some like the incredible stuff you're seeing here. And I just think it's looked on as not a real part of art. Like these people are literally risking their lives for us to have a good time at the theater. And I think it was time to praise them. And I think the sense of all these movies kind of happening in this around this time of year, because it's sort of like, oh, well, people just want to go to the movie. They're going to just go see an action movie. Yeah, exactly. And it's because all these performers are risking it all for them and working and combining to make things feel seamless. Like when you think of some of the biggest movie moments of all time, it probably involves not your lead actor, it involves a stunt performer doing one of the craziest things you've ever seen. Like there's in John Wick 4, there's a sequence where people are just like falling downstairs endlessly. There's no way to fake that easily. That is just a brutal thing. And so I feel stunt performers give it all for their art, receive very little attention. Often it's stars going, well, I did it. And like, while we know Keanu and Tom do it, I think there's a lot of movie stars who say they do their own stunts that aren't. And they're okay with not even getting the credit. And they're risking their lives. And so in the celebration of my favorite type of movie, an action movie, I wanted to give a little bit of time to stuntmen and just say, thank you for all the amazing stuff you put on screen this year, from Plane, John Wick 4, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie had a lot of fun sequences in it. And of course, like the John Wick franchise is just like, to me, an ode to the stunt performer. And I felt like it was time to give it their due. So that's who won art this week, stuntmen. And I highly recommend over at vulture.com, they did something called the Stunt Awards for last year. And it was like a really comprehensive talk about what stunts mean to film and how they're done. Everything here, everywhere, all at once. Another movie loaded with stunt scenes, won Best Picture. And like, I feel like that stunt team deserved its attention as much as the cast did. And so like, to me, this is like both, again, money loves stunts and stuff, but don't want to see it as art because it's making it too fancy. And so again, to connect the dots, I want to see like stunt people deserve their own category at the Oscars, and just in general, a little extra appreciation, because at least for me, they're one of the main reasons I go to movies. So that is it, everybody. Thanks for coming to the episode, watching, comments. I really appreciated. Thank Caullen, my guest, and I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks and figure out what we're talking about. Thank you so much.
I'll see you later, huh?
Wait.
I'll see you later. I bid you farewell and good luck, morons. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Then in the next episode,
Will take place 2 weeks from today.
Hey, that's all. I gotta go.